What's up, my friends? How y'all doing today? Today's video, I just returned from a trip, and I was reading an article when I returned, and it was an article by a vegetarian, or rather by a vegan, and it was written to vegans, and it was a very interesting article, and it got me thinking about several discussions I've had in the past with people about vegetarianism and veganism. And I wanted to make this video in a way as a kind of a peace gesture between vegans and non-vegans, and to realize that a life choice of what you eat does not necessarily make you a person who is more in touch with the earth, nor more healthy or in touch with yourself. But if that's what works for you and makes you feel good, it's phenomenal, as long as a person doesn't become elitist about it. Now, to cover both bases, first off, I understand that the reason why vegans are often frustrated is because they see people eating this mass-produced meat that's grown in these horrible feedlots, chickens with beaks removed, cows that can't even move, horrible cramped conditions, stuffed with antibiotics, polluting the water system. It takes 600 gallons of water to produce one hamburger. So all of this damage to the environment and to our ecosystem, to ourselves, this is understood. Now, on the other hand, eating a lot of meat as well is also damaging to the body. So I'm just covering the bases of how meat is bad here, so I can get to why it's not that big of a deal if a person chooses to have a burger now and again. So we as humans have to realize that eating too much meat is bad for our body, and especially if it's processed bad. But if you look back through history and you look at the way that cultures have raised and slaughtered their meat, such as certain cultures, you start to realize there's no one-size-fits-all. Trying to make the world vegan will never happen. And here's why. Because each culture will always have, for example, there are places where it's very difficult to grow crops. But, for example, in the Middle East, in places where the people would have goats, and considering all the different available foods from all the different sources, it's very difficult to say that eating one thing is better than another. I'll give you an extreme example. Is a person who's eating grass-fed beef from his ranch, where he only has a few cows and they're sustainably eating the grass and they're being raised properly, grass-fed beef that's not, let's just say that's properly raised. And that person eats burgers now and again. Now let's compare it to an extreme vegan who is always eating these particular vegetarian dishes, but never realizes that the packaging they come in is intensive and environmentally damaging, that it's imported from another country perhaps. Now this is an extreme example, but maybe some of the foods are not sustainably harvested, or maybe growing those crops is damaging to the local animal population. So there's no way for us to know that everything we eat isn't damaging in some way. But what we want to do is lessen the effects on the environment and lessen the effects on our own health negatively. And that's obvious. So let's set that aside for a minute and talk about the aspect of an animal being alive and conscious, because this is where the dispute gets in and people get heated. And I've asked vegans what defines an animal. And there's been kind of a resurgence of talk about these subjects because of the whole insect thing. Now, insects have been eaten around the world for a long time, in all different types of cultures. But of course now in the West it's becoming a trendy thing, and people don't realize that many of the red coloring they have in certain foods, that's made from crushed beetles. That the synthetic raspberry flavor is in like those donuts that everybody loves so much is made from beaver anal gland secretions. And there are several other things that are made from parts of animals, and people are generally trying to avoid that because of not wanting to damage the environment. And that's understandable. The problem comes when vegans treat other humans like shit because of their choice of what they eat. And often we'll see that there are a lot of people out there, and I've spoken with a lot of them, who tell me basically that humans suck and that animals deserve respect. And we forget that we're part of the food chain too. And we get into the debate of, well, there's an ethical consideration of that we're conscious and we have the choice to eat meat or not. And this is so true, which is brings me to my point, which is, don't you think that a person who develops his own ethics and his own reason and makes his own decisions can choose to eat meat once a week and not feel guilty about it? And a vegan would say often absolutely not, that there is no way for a person to eat meat and not be damaging the environment or themselves somehow. And this is akin to the people I've heard from AA who have said, I will never drink alcohol again, so nobody should ever drink alcohol. There are people out there who can drink responsibly and not damage themselves, but for those who can't, that's very difficult to understand. And so I just wanted to pose this, this controversial subject, I guess, because I know a lot of vegans, people are sometimes surprised that I eat meat. I'm a compassionate person. I'm an ethical person. I have the utmost respect for the environment. I clean up my litter. I protect animals. When I was at the regional Burning Man here, I followed this little shrew around, or it was a vole that was eating. I didn't want him to get crushed by the passersby, and I'm here I am protecting this little creature that doesn't need my protection. But just the thought of something like that, a small mouse, I don't even want to kill the rats when I see them running around the neighborhood, and I don't even like swatting a fly. If I see a bee in my house, I bottle it and I let it go outside. But there's been a discussion about if things have eyeballs, then they're not edible. And I believe that plant consciousness is, although it may not see through the same eyes as we do, although there are many insects that don't see through the same types of eyes as we do. There are lots of different ways of feeling, and we don't understand how the nerve centers work in all insects. And there's a huge controversy of whether or not we should eat insects. And so here was another story I heard. Down in Texas, they have a problem with the wild boar population. They got out of control. And the boars are now destroying the natural habitat. So people are out hunting and killing these boars. There's pretty much fair game, no pun intended. And so if a person's out there and he hunts a boar, or let's say the deer population gets too big and they tag a couple deer, and then they respectfully use that meat, use that hide, I see absolutely no problem with it. It's just a matter of there's a large misunderstanding. People don't want to empathize with others and see where they're coming from, because not all meat eaters eat a lot of meat. I only eat meat maybe twice a week tops, and sometimes not even that. It's not my favorite thing to eat, but I do enjoy good meat, and I do drink dairy, and I think it's just really difficult for people to come together and see it's okay that some people choose to eat meat and some people don't. And for me, it's a much more difficult line, because there is the issue of, I believe that plants are aware. I believe that plants are conscious. I don't believe that they think the way we do, but I believe they have an energy and a consciousness of within maybe the whole symbiosis of the woods themselves. And therefore, for me, whatever you eat, it's about paying reverence to nature for providing it, and to look and weigh the option of that dish you're eating with how much it's going to cost. Because we don't have to starve ourselves of great things because we think that we're saving the world. There are certain things we can do to make a huge impact on the environment. And one of those is to stop eating fast food beef, to stop throwing meat in every meal, and to stop buying from companies that make bad decisions, unethical decisions. But I live in the Pacific Northwest, and we have lots of meats available here, and local dairy, and so I can understand where people are coming from on both sides. I just hope to see both sides get along on the issue one of these days, and just live together, symbiosis. And living together does not mean that we have to scare ourselves into not eating other creatures. and to realize that we are part of that picture. We are part of that system. You just have to pay the reverence. Anyway, talk to y'all soon.